What is the weirdest family rule you've heard? Story 1. My friend had a 9 p.m. bedtime that was thoroughly enforced by her mom's creepy boyfriend. I stayed over once, not knowing about this. We had to be in bed, lights out by 9 or else. He sat outside the bedroom to make sure we didn't even talk to each other. I wasn't used to going to bed so early at 16, so after about 45 minutes I got up to pee and he interrogated me on what I was doing and told me I had 3 minutes to be back in bed, or else. So I never slept over again, but once she came to my house and this dude drove by at 9:05 p.m. and saw my bedroom light was on. Yes, he made her point out my bedroom window so he could check. Then he called my house and demanded my mom tell him why we weren't in bed. She lied and told him we were sleeping in the basement and she was cleaning my room. Then told him he better f*** off pronto or she'd be calling the police on him for scoping out her kid's bedroom window. Story 2. Growing up, my bedroom door was never allowed to be closed. My door was removed once and it was like a screen door. And if we had guests over, that is the only time the bathroom door was closed. There was no privacy. For example, if I was using the bathroom my parents would try to have a full conversation and sometimes show me a funny video. Now when I use the bathroom, if I hear them coming to the bathroom, I stop what I'm doing and wait for them to come in. I have a really hard time going in a public bathroom because of people coming in because I automatically stop going to the bathroom. I have actually been diagnosed with paralysis. A person with shy bladder syndrome finds it difficult or impossible to go to the bathroom when other people are around. Paralysis is believed to be a common type of social phobia. They also use the bathroom when I'm in the shower. There's some other weird things that happen too. When I'm getting dressed, they also come into my room. My father is naked a lot and talks to me while he's naked. When I am in my room, I always listen for footsteps and stop what I'm doing and wait for them to come in. I have severe anxiety because of all this. I know it's not normal and I'm in therapy because of everything. Story 3. My stepmom had a totally bonkers rule about feet. She was irrationally afraid of plantar warts and, according to her, anyone she didn't know intimately had plantar warts. As a family, we had a second home or beach house that was basically a small bungalow and only had one restroom with one stall shower. Nobody, no friends, relatives, could use that shower after the beach because they'll get their plantar wart all over the floor and then she'll take a shower and she'll get plantar warts. We also had a swimming pool and she would make new people, including children, wear socks in the swimming pool. And as far as I know, nobody living in our house, including her, ever had plantar warts. So, unreasonable? Sure. Effective? Sure. Story 4. Growing up, my dad always had this strange rule when it came to eating bagels. He had this special tissue that he would use to wipe his hands while eating a bagel, and it was strictly for that purpose only. No one was allowed to touch it or use it for any other reason. But that was just the tip of the iceberg when it came to my dad's bagel rules. According to him, bagels were only allowed to be eaten on bagel toasts. No plates or bowls were allowed. This meant that every time I wanted to eat a bagel, I had to use the bagel toaster, which was a hassle in itself. And if the toaster was broken or unavailable, tough luck, no bagels for me. One day, I tried to get creative and decided to heat up my bagel in the microwave. My dad caught me in the act and was livid. He yelled at me, saying that microwaving bagels was sacrilegious and that it ruined the texture and flavor of the bagel. I tried to reason with him, but he was adamant. I couldn't even use a plate or a bowl to hold my bagel. Apparently, the only acceptable way to eat a bagel was on a bagel toast. I couldn't understand why my dad was so obsessed with this rule, but I knew better than to question him. Story 5. My aunt had this rule. I lived down the alley from her and would visit to play with my little cousin when I was younger, sometimes even to babysit. Even when she wasn't there, I wasn't allowed to get water or have a snack. I had to go home and get my own. But when I was babysitting, I couldn't leave my cousin alone in the house at all, and I was not allowed to take her out of the yard. So I had to bring my own snacks and water, and if I forgot to, I was shit out of luck until she got home. If I even asked, she would call me spoiled and send me home. I couldn't stay for dinner either, and if I did, I wasn't allowed to eat with the family. I had to sit and watch. I always just left. Also, if I was babysitting or just visiting, my younger cousin made the rules. I had to do everything she wanted or said, and if I didn't, she'd cry to her mom later and rat me out. She did this often for not letting her leave the yard. My aunt would get mad at me for it. Needless to say, I rarely ever babysat my cousin. This is also the same aunt of mine who tried telling my mom I stole cigarettes from her, and she screamed at my mom about it. My mom just laughed and said, "Why the f would my 9-year-old daughter steal smokes from you?" and slammed the door on her face, locking her out. She tried claiming my dad asked me to take them from her, to which my dad immediately backed me up because why the hell would he make me do such a thing, especially when he had money to buy them himself. We don't talk to her anymore, and I chose not to talk to my cousin for multiple reasons. Story 6. When we were 13, a friend of mine was kicked out of the house by his parents for a week because he stacked things wrong in the freezer, and some bread got squished. He spent the week staying at different friends' houses each night until his parents let him come back home. The mom was super religious and tended to be pretty strict, but tried, unsuccessfully, to hide it when any of our group were at their house.
The stepdad wasn't allowed to have much input when it came to any punishments because he wasn't the bio dad. My friend and his sister were always punished pretty much immediately by the mum, and stepdad would just kinda disappear.
Regardless of the error made, the punishments would build until she would snap and say something like, "Get out of my house, I don't want to see your face." She was definitely verbally and emotionally abusive, but I never saw signs of physical abuse. There were multiple occurrences of me or other friends going to spend the night and being sent back home shortly after because she was in a bad mood and my friend didn't have his room clean enough for her liking. That is a plate and fork on the dresser from breakfast, or a couple clothing items on the floor. Story 7. I was in a friend's kitchen when we were 8, sneezed, then turned and took a kitchen paper tissue from the roll, cleared my nose, and walked toward the kitchen sink door to throw the wad into the trash bin. My friend burst out, "WHAT are you doing?" I'm like, "What? Throw away the trash." He continued, "Are you crazy? Snot paper doesn't go in the kitchen trash. Jesus, what if mom found out?" I'd already thrown it, but he fished it out of the bin and flushed it in the toilet in under 10 seconds. I already knew his mom was a nasty old bat leaks, but I had no idea how deep her will manifested itself in that sick house. Story 8. Extreme politeness. One of my friend's moms had very strict rules about politeness. I once went to this friend's house as a kid, and she offered me something to drink. I said yes please and thank you once she gave me the drink. The next day at school, she told me her mom was upset and wasn't sure if I was allowed to come back. According to her, I should have said yes, thank you for offering me this drink, and then thank you again after getting the drink. Both yes please and yes thank you are correct in my language. In the end, I was allowed to go back, but that's such a weird reason to be mad at a kid. We also weren't allowed to call something ugly or say that something tastes or smells bad. Instead, we had to say, "I don't like how it smells or tastes." Story 9. When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time at my best friend's house. Her mom was always nice to me, but she had some pretty strange rules. One of the weirdest rules was that we weren't allowed to drink more than 1 glass of water in the afternoon. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured her mom had some kind of reason for it, like maybe she didn't want us to have to go to the bathroom too much or something. But then I found out her reasoning behind the rule. She believed that drinking too much water would dilute the nutrients in our bodies and make us unhealthy. Instead of water, she would give us 7-Up if we were thirsty. I was confused by this rule, and honestly, a little bit worried. I had always been taught that water was the healthiest thing to drink, and I didn't understand why we couldn't have more of it. But I didn't want to be rude, so I went along with it. However, as the days went on, I found myself getting more and more thirsty. Drinking 7-Up all the time didn't quench my thirst like water did, and I couldn't understand why my friend's mom insisted on this rule. Eventually, I decided to take matters into my own hands. Every time I went to the bathroom, I would sneak a drink of water from the bathroom faucet. I knew it was kind of gross, but I was so thirsty that I didn't care. Story 10. My aunt kicked my cousin out on her 18th birthday when she was about 3 months into high school. I guess it wasn't an immediate kick out. She said, "You're an adult now, so you can either pay me rent or get your own place." My cousin was like, "Well, F you then, I'm moving out." This was still the days of checking Craigslist for roommate listings, and thank the Lord the 33-year-old man she moved in with was a legit good dude and basically saw a kid in need and took her in and charged her very minimal rent, and they're still close. To this day, no one in the family knew this was going on, otherwise one of us would have taken her in. Also, my aunt and uncle are well off. Uncle is a criminal lawyer and aunt is a dentist. And they let my other cousin, her younger brother, live with them until he was 24, and the only reason he's not there anymore is because he's in prison. Story 11. I was 5 and at a friend's house. We were playing in the leaves outside. There was a box of leaves. I wanted to move closer to his box of leaves. My box had no bottom, so the leaves spilled out into a small pile. He went and told his mother. She came out and spanked me quite hard. I ran home crying to my mom, partly because it hurt and partly because of the injustice. She comforted me, but didn't do much else, or so I thought. I learned, decades later, my mom called up the spanker and told her to never lay a hand on any of her children ever again. Story 12. I had a friend in 5th grade and her mother was legitimately insane. She wouldn't let her daughter come to my house because we had carpeted. I think she had some Munchausen by proxy because she was convinced her child was allergic to everything, including dust mites or any innocuous dirt in the carpeting. The girl also developed an eating disorder. She was a dancer when we were kids and her mother apparently monitored what she ate extremely closely. I felt so badly for her. Story 13. I had a couple childhood friends whose family had the same damn rule. No drinking water during a meal. Their family also served incredibly big plates of food, which we weren't used to, and the cup we could drink after we were done was stupidly small. Another house rule that was no good was to be left uneaten. Good rule in theory, but us 9 to 7-year-old children were being served 2 to 3 adult-sized plates filled to the brim, plus dessert. The way that family ate was incredible. My brother and I loved going over because their house was amazing. We later found out their money came from their dad dealing drugs, but we hated their mealtime. Our friends were made to wait for us to finish eating, standing behind their chair. Sometimes it would take us a couple hours to somewhat finish, but most times we couldn't do it. It got awkward sometimes. Story 14. Growing up, I had an uncle who had some pretty bizarre rules in his house. He was married with 3 children, but you wouldn't know it by the way he ran things. Everything in the house had to be done according to his strict rules, and everyone else had to fall in line. One of his most ridiculous rules was that there could only be 1 bowl, 1 plate, 1 spoon, 1 fork, 1 knife, and 1 cup in the house. If anyone needed to eat, they had to wait until the person before them was done and had washed their utensils. It was a never-ending cycle of waiting and washing, and it made me dread meal times at my uncle's house. But that wasn't even the worst of it. My uncle had this strange hierarchy for eating as well. He always ate first, followed by his wife, and then the children by age. If there wasn't enough food to go around, the kids would just have to go without. It was a cruel system, and it made me feel sorry for my cousins. And if all of that wasn't enough, my uncle had a strange obsession with light bulbs. He only allowed 1 light bulb in the house, and when he went to another room, the light bulb would follow him. It was like something out of a horror movie, and it made me feel uneasy being in his house. Story 15. We weren't allowed to interact with anyone outside the family. Mom and Dad were afraid of liberals, communists, atheists, Satanists, demons, gay people, and most other religions, so they didn't want to risk us being exposed to the notion of tolerance. In theory, there was an approval process to get around that rule. Basically, my parents had to talk to that person and ensure that they believed all the same things my parents did. In practice, almost no one got through the process, and the few that did disqualified themselves almost immediately once the actual interaction began. Story 16. My parents will swear up and down that none of these actually happened, but they didn't let us watch Rugrats because the way they talk about adults is vile. Picked me up from a sleepover at 1 a.m. and spanked me in front of my friends because they found a picture of Britney Spears hidden under my bunk bed, which led to the only Christian radio station's rule. Grounded me for a month for 1 episode of Ren and Stimpy, which led to the no Nickelodeon ever. House rule: Power Rangers was obviously straight from Satan, so that was out. I brought home some homework about evolution in 7th grade and my dad burned it and took the ashes to my science teacher. This was when the only God-approved science house rules started. The don't make a single noise after PM, including the microwave beeping ever, and tiptoe so you don't get interrogated rule, was unspoken but very well understood. Forced me to wear Jesus shirts to middle school with all my skater friends, which got me bullied for years, which led to the very obvious follow-up rule: if you are told it isn't happening, then it can't possibly be happening. Religious folks are f***ing weird. Story 17. I've been dating a woman for a few months, and everything seemed normal until we took a vacation to visit her biological family. When we arrived at her parents' house, I was surprised to find out that we weren't allowed to sit next to each other or stand close to each other. It was as if we were strangers meeting for the first time. To make matters worse, we weren't allowed to share a bed. I had to sleep on the couch, and my girlfriend had to sleep in a spare room. It felt like we were being punished for something, but we couldn't figure out what. Eventually, we asked her parents why we couldn't sit together or share a bed. Their response was shocking. They said they didn't want any funny things happening in front of them. They thought that if we were allowed to sit together or share a bed, we might engage in some kind of inappropriate behavior. I was dumbfounded. I couldn't believe that two consenting adults were being treated like children who couldn't be trusted to behave themselves. It was insulting and degrading, and it made me feel like we weren't even allowed to be in a relationship. Despite the ridiculous rule, my girlfriend and I still had a good time on vacation. We made the most of the situation and found ways to be close to each other without breaking her parents' strange rule. But it was a constant reminder of how different our families were and how some people have such strange beliefs and values. Story 18. When I was a kid, my friend's mom was a little nuts. She had a sitting room with a couch and a love seat that nobody was ever allowed to sit on. You had to walk through it to get to the rest of the house, and it led to the kitchen and then the living room. If you sat on the furniture in the sitting room, she'd throw a fit. I always felt like it was such a waste to have such a nice room and never use it. It would have been a perfect study room or reading room. She also had other crazy rules, like punishing my friend when his little sister did anything wrong, as if he was responsible for her actions and looking out for her.